37. Family, say amen.
Amen.
And it reads, the next day, when they came down from the mountain, a large crowd met him. Just then a man from the crowd cried out, "Teacher," speaking of Jesus, "I beg you to look at my son because he's my only child. A spirit seizes him. Suddenly he shrieks and it throws him into convulsions until he foams at the mouth, severely bruising him. It scarcely ever leaves him. I begged your disciples to drive it out, but they couldn't." Jesus then replied, "You unbelieving and perverse generation, how long will I be with you and put up with you?" Wow, Jesus. "Bring your son here." As the boy was still approaching, the demon knocked him down and threw him into severe convulsions. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit and healed the boy and gave him back to his father, and they were all astonished at the greatness of God. You may be seated in the presence of the Lord. I want to try to preach for just a few moments, and I want you to consider as a subject this morning a community diagnosis, a community misdiagnosis, a community misdiagnosis. When a community misdiagnoses one of its own. A community misdiagnosis. This week I came across a story about a young lady by the name of Nina. As a matter of fact, the story was called Nina's Story. It says that Nina's symptoms started at 14 years old, and she didn't get properly diagnosed until her 25th birthday. Her condition, what they now know as endometriosis, had been dismissed as just cramps and mental health. They even said maybe she was abused as a child and this was her way of acting out. But Nina knew that there was something more than mental health and cramps. Her girlfriends could take a Tylenol and be okay with their physical cycle, but not her. She knew there was something just a little bit wrong. Because of her age and folks didn't know much about that particular condition at the time, her doctors assumed that she was exaggerating her pain. Her friends said that she is being too sensitive. The story goes on to say she eventually was diagnosed correctly and had the proper surgery. But Nina says in this story, if it had been diagnosed earlier, she could have given a name to why she had to miss so many classes. Nina says if it had been diagnosed earlier, she could have given a name to why her pain was so unbearable. If it had been diagnosed earlier, she could have gotten the kind of treatment necessary instead of taking meds that, although they were good, they delayed the actual diagnosis. If she had gotten the right diagnosis earlier, friends and family could have understood that she had a real condition and she wasn't just faking.
Wow. Preach.
Have you ever been misdiagnosed? Diagnosed because of your body language? Diagnosed because of your facial expressions? Diagnosed because how you said what you said? Misdiagnosed because of the way you look? Misdiagnosed because of whose family you are associated with? Misdiagnosed because of your last name? Misdiagnosed because of the complexion of your skin? Misdiagnosed because of the coarseness of your hair? Misdiagnosis because of the length of your hair? Misdiagnosis because of the zip code associated with your address? Have you ever been misdiagnosed. Here's what I've discovered in my research. They say some reports suggest that 12 million Americans are diagnosed with conditions they don't really have. And half of which have the potential to end in severe harm. Another statistic says over 40,000 who go into an intensive care unit will have a misdiagnosis that will cost them their life. Can I ask you a question, parents? Can I ask some of our young people a question this morning? How many young men and women have been labeled ADHD? How many have been labeled as a behavior disorder problem? How many of them have a label of LD, learning disabled? How many young men, particularly of color, have been exposed, have been suspended in school or out because of their behavior, not because they are a threat, because their behavior is what they have deemed as aggressive. I call it full of energy. And because it's been misinterpreted and misdiagnosed, we slap the label on it and place them on a track that will follow them for the rest of their lives. How many of us have been misdiagnosed and mislabeled and misrepresented? How many young ladies are considered loose because God blessed them in whatever they wear? A misdiagnosis. And we attach a character trait to a misdiagnosis. So he has a learning disabled, so he's a problem child. He's full of energy, so he's overly aggressive and he needs to be dealt with. She likes to express herself verbally, so she talks too much. We misdiagnose. In my preaching, or preparation for my preaching this morning, I discovered that epilepsy comes from the Greek meaning to attack or meaning to be gripped. And the word demon has been often translated as lunatic. But here's what I like about the gospel. Here's where the gospel shows up, and here's where it helps us. Jesus, as in the story of the possessed man in Mark 5 and in Luke 8, he recognizes that the physiological manifestation is a symptom of something spiritual. And so I'm saying to you this morning, I believe there are conditions that we need to tend to. There are real problems that need to be addressed. There are some corrective behavior that we need to make sure that we're involved in. And so Jesus addresses this issue of this young boy. But here's what I've noticed in the text, Marge. He never labeled it like they did. Wow. Jesus never uses the phrase demon possessed. He never uses the phrase lunatic. In Mark 5 and in Luke 8, he never calls the young man Legion. The young man says, I am Legion, meaning I have multiple personalities. Jesus looked at him and simply said, what is your name? Yeah. Could it be that in this text, that their diagnosis caused them to say that the boy had something that he didn't? Could it be in this text that they said that he had something that he had not? Maybe, just maybe, our teenagers are engaging in self-injurious behavior because we have said they have something that they don't. Maybe our teenagers and our young people are acting out because we've called them something that they are not. Maybe our young people have lost the capacity or the will to respond to our foolishness. And because we can't put our finger on a response, we slap a label to it. I can only imagine this boy, like Nina in our story earlier, saying, I'm not a demon. I just have convulsions. I'm not a lunatic. I just have some seizures. I'm not crazy. I just got cramps. I'm not acting out. I'm in real pain. Maybe if we take our young people at their word, maybe if we trust in what they're saying, perhaps our conversations will be shaped differently. Maybe the way we respond to our young people will look different. I'm out your way. Verse 41. Jesus responds and replies. He responds cold and replies with frustration. He's frustrated at two groups of people in this text. He's frustrated at the man, at the father. He's frustrated at the crowd and the community. And then he's frustrated at his own disciples. He's frustrated at a lack of faith. He's frustrated with them for a lack of belief. And he's frustrated with those who should have had the ability and the authority to heal or to address the current condition. Come on. If you'll allow me to exercise what I call salvific conjecture this morning, I'd like to impose ourselves in the text this morning. I think that he was wrestling with the educators. Okay. I think he was frustrated with the parents. I think he was frustrated with our houses of worship that come and play church but do very little to touch the soul of the community. Right. I think he was frustrated with those who had the capacity and the ability and the responsibility to heal and to cure. Jesus was probably saying, why are you putting this condition back on the boy? Why are you blaming the boy who has the condition? I'm tired of you, you perverse generation. How long must I be with you? Part of his frustration with the disciples, if you read this text in other translations and you read it in the other gospels, they asked him in private, why couldn't we do it, Jesus? And Jesus says, this kind can only come out by prayer and fasting. Can I suggest to you that prayer and fasting is an intimate exchange with the divine? Yeah. And so if you want to translate this to secular terms, how are you going to cure someone that you're not spending authentic time with? Yes. How are you going to properly diagnose what you're not close to? So as an educator, a former educator, they would give us these sheets when a kid was acting out. And if the kid met an X amount of criteria, we labeled him AD. If there were enough checks in the box, he was ADHD if he was hyper, and not only could he not remember. And so instead of us engaging this child relationally, instead of us investing time and spending time, instead of us getting to know, instead of us looking for creative alternatives, we took the expedient route. Jesus is saying, the frustration I'm having is not with the boy who has the condition, but my frustration are with those who have the ability, the capacity, and the responsibility to cure. But not only was Jesus frustrated, in verse 42, he talks about resolution. There's a resolution in verse 42. Jesus said, yes, I am glad that you've come to me to heal. And we should be today glad that Jesus is still in the healing business. Amen. But I think Jesus gives us the capacity to heal and to resolve as well. Jesus says on one occasion, marvel not at the things that I do, for greater things than these shall You do. On one occasion, he looked at a mountain. He told his disciples, you can speak to that mountain and it shall be cast away. On another occasion, speak those things that are not as if they were, and they shall come to pass. Do you know that the disciples eventually healed people because of their shadow? There were people who walked in the presence of the disciples and immediately were healed by the blessing that was left by their shadow. On one occasion, the man said, Jesus, I know who you are. You don't even have to show up. If you just say the word, you'll be healed.
Hallelujah.
We have the capacity and the ability to heal. I know that's a frightening word for some of us, but we have the ability to heal, to cure, to recorrect, to set free, to deliver. We have that ability and capacity. And I want to say to you that we have a responsibility. It is ours. Time out for us looking outside of ourselves when God has already given us the resources to do it ourselves. We're looking outside of that. My father-in-law, in that strong West Indian accent, says I go to the doctor when I need to. I heal myself. I know my body. I know my body. I heal myself. Roots. I know my body. I have Nutonic right here. The capacity to heal.
Yes, true that. Yes.
When you are engaged, when you are intentional, you understand the dynamics. Sometimes we make our daughter come out of the bedroom. Yeah, we set it up nice for you. Yeah, you got some electronic equipment where you can go and settle and play in there. But we need to see you. We need to touch you. We need to feel you. We need to know that there's an exchange. So if there's some diagnosis that's taking place, we can put our finger on it.
Amen. Amen.
So when the teacher calls us, we can say yeah or nay.
Amen.
Either we've seen it or we haven't. It should not be a surprise to us. We got to diagnose this thing correctly. We got to take back the authority that we have been given and stop having Jesus frustrated with us because we have the capacity to do what he said we can do. Here's how I want to end this morning. I want to end this morning by asking a question. I want to ask us a question because I think inherent in our questions are what we already believe. Okay. And so what kind of questions are you asking about the kids you're privileged to raise? What kind of questions are you asking about the kids you've been honored to nurture? What kind of questions are you asking about the kids whom you've been called to love? What kind of questions are you asking about them? Because your questions will frame how you engage them. Can we be transparent? Can I just be transparent? I'll take the transparency for some of y'all. Some of us, we project onto our kids our own insecurities. We project onto our kids our own shortcomings. And so we ain't really mad at them when we snap. It's our own stuff.
Yeah.
But because we're the authority figure, they can't challenge us back. Mm-hmm. But the reality of it is we were out of order. Amen. We had no business talking to them like that. We had no business addressing them like that. We had no business calling them out like that. But our own stuff got in the way. And now our own stuff is projected onto them, and now they're acting out, and now they have a diagnosis, and we're wondering why we precipitated it. Yes. We put them in a position to act out. Easy now. I don't know why she's acting like that. I don't know why he acting. Yes, you do. It starts with you. Amen. Jesus is frustrated. Frustrated. I wish we had time this morning to be able to kind of talk about perhaps some best practices to help realign the family. So that when diagnoses take place, we are in position and empowered to say either that's correct, is on, or is off and is false. But that only comes through relationship, through invested and intentional time, through conversation. I know my wife pulls conversation out of our daughter. Sometimes when she don't want to talk, just pulls it out of her. We gonna make you say something. You gonna say something. And not just I'm doing all right. All right how? All right why? What makes it so? What happened today?
That's good. That's good.
Was it good today?
That's good. That's good.
What did you do today?
That's good.
Tell me about it. We got to ask questions under the response. So if they say this, we got to ask the question under that response because it's going to lead to something else. We got to ask that. And then our diagnosis is correct. Yeah, she's been acting out of school. Yeah, I know. I understand. Yeah, he's been a little off. Yeah, I know. Let's talk about it. And together, we can help. Right? Instead of looking to punish. Yeah. We need to stop. We need to move away from so much punishment. We need to be looking for corrective resolutions that put our kids back in the place where they have been ordained to be in the first place. We got to work towards that. That's a diagnosis. When a community misdiagnoses its own, it has generational consequences. Because if you misdiagnose, you set back, and then they cause havoc in the communities that they came out of. It becomes a revolving problem or concern. So the sooner we begin to diagnose correctly, the better we'll begin to see how God has already created and wired them. I want to close this morning. I want to ask you the question that Jesus himself asked. In chapter 9, this is a question for all of us. You unbelieving and perverse generation, that's us. How long will I be with you and put up with you? Bring the boy to me. Here's my question. How long does Jesus have to put up with us? And when will Jesus be able to say, I saw you heal. I saw you correct. I saw you cure. Well done, my good and faithful servant.